Hello, I'm glad you're here. This is Jennifer McGuire, and I am excited to bring you my first guest artist of the new year. I think it's really important to share the work of others so you can see how much great inspiration there is out there. So today I have my friend Carissa Wiley, and she is sharing some color blocking techniques. This is a really great way to create unique cards, and you can do so pretty quickly. One of the best parts of this technique is that once you've done your colored block background, you can do stamping on top of it, like Carissa does with any stamps you have. You could do stenciling on top of it. You could even use an embossing folder. So there are many different ideas that can come from her inspiration today. Now, before we jump in, I just wanted to share a bit of information with you. The products that Chris is using today are from Altenew. She's using some new stuff and some old stuff, but they are offering a special exclusive deal to my viewers, and this is a really good one, and that's why I'm mentioning it in the video. If you spend $79 or more, you can get a free pack of their color cardstock, beautiful colors that you see here. I'm really liking their cardstock because there are unique colors that I'm not finding that other companies carry, so I'm excited about this offer. So all you need to do is add $79 to your cart, add the paper pack to your cart, and then use the code, and I have that information below. I also wanted to mention that my exclusive discount code for the Secret Garden virtual event ends soon. This event is in May, and it's always one that I enjoy very much. Love all the teachers that will be teaching, and I'm doing an extra bonus class too. And the products included are really unique and fun. I'm really excited about it. So I'll have information on how you can save 42% in my description below. I just wanted to give that information, but now it's time for Carissa.
Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley from sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me here. I am so honored to be a guest here on Jennifer's channel, and I hope you enjoy the projects that I have to share with you today. Now, I'm going to be featuring some products from Altenew, and we're going to be talking about color blocking and some stamping with the Stampwheel 2.0 today. I will be featuring the Craft Your Life Translucent Foliage Craft Kit. Now, specifically, I'll be using the stamp set today, but keep in mind there are coordinating stencils, dies, and a 3D embossing folder that come in this kit. I just think these large florals are so beautiful. I'll be using those for the floral stamping that we'll do on our backgrounds, as well as for some of the sentiments. I'm going to be doing some color blocking with cardstocks today, and I have the Altenew Crafty Necessities cardstocks. These are a great weight for die cutting and using for card fronts. They range anywhere from 80 to 90 pounds, and there's a beautiful range of colors. These cardstocks also coordinate beautifully with their fresh dye inks of the same names, and so I have those pulled out today. You could definitely do this color blocking technique with ink blending, but I'm going to be using the cardstocks today. So I have Coral Bliss, Rouge, Pastel Sunrise, Volcano Lake, and Dark Night cardstocks, and since I don't have Pastel Sunrise ink, I pulled out Pink Pearl instead. It coordinates nicely. So I just wanted to kind of flip through my little swatch book of the Altenew cardstocks. These are just the colors of cardstocks that I have from Altenew. You can see there's a beautiful range, and there have been even more colors released since I put my swatch book together that I don't have yet. So I'm going to start out by cutting down my cardstock. These are 8.5 by 11, so I'm just trimming them in half to make them a more manageable size. I'm trimming at 5.5 inches, and then I'm going to take a couple of these and trim them down to 4.25 by 5.5 inch panels. I've grabbed one panel of the Pastel Sunrise and one panel of the Rouge cardstock, and I'm holding them together, and my first idea for color blocking is to create a large diagonal stripe across the bottom of your cardstock. So in order to do this, I'm placing one corner at the 1 3/4 inch mark and the other corner at the 2 3/4 inch mark, and I'm trimming both of these down together so that I have two pieces of cardstock that make up an entire A2 size card panel. Now this actually gives me enough for 2 cards, but I'm just creating a single card with this design today. Now I also love to create tiny strips of cardstock and use those on my card as kind of a focal piece, a place to bring in a lot of color. This is a great way to use a color palette that has several colors in them. And I'm trimming these strips to about 3/16 of an inch. Trust me, it's a magical sizing for these color strips. Now my next idea for color blocking, and we'll put all these together here in just a bit, But my next idea for color blocking is kind of a graduated stripe design. So my largest stripe at the bottom is 2.5 inches. Then I've cut the next strip to 1.5 inches. And then I used a 1-inch strip and a 1/2-inch strip. Finally, I'm doing a large diagonal stripe design. My 2 center stripes are 1.5 inches. And the outer stripes measure 1 3/4 inches. And that will make a little more sense here as I'm placing this together. Now I have a piece of white cardstock that measures 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm covering the entire thing with some tape runner adhesive. Now the reason that stripe on the bottom and the stripe on the top are a little bit larger is because we're placing these at an angle, and I wanted to make sure the corners were covered on the outer piece of this card front. So once I have those adhered, I will trim all those down, and I have a beautiful color blocked panel for my card. Now, if you don't want to use your tape runner adhesive, or if you want a quick way to do this, you can grab the Altenew adhesive sheets. I've trimmed this down to just slightly smaller than my card front, which again measures 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And I'm peeling back just a portion of that backer so that I can protect the adhesive from the oils on my finger. And now I am bringing in my stamp wheel to make sure that everything is squared up. So by placing my card base into the lower corner of the stamp wheel, I know that it's squared up. And when I place the strip on top of it, I'm making sure that it butts up against the corner of that stamp wheel. This starts everything off on a nice straight plumb line and keeps all of these stripes nice and straight across my card base. And with each successive stripe, I'm just going to make sure that I kind of butt it up against the bottom edge of that stamp wheel, and also make sure it nestles up nicely to the previous strip that I placed. This keeps everything nice and straight on the card front, and nothing will get wonky because you've squared it up from the beginning. Now for our third card front, I am again adding some Altenew adhesive sheet to my card front. All of these card fronts are the same size, but I've cut different patterns and different sizes of stripes to create various looks. I'm using these large diagonal pieces that we cut first, and I'm placing them right onto the card base using that Altenew adhesive sheet. And once I have them placed, I'm going to trim down any excess with my trimmer, or you can use a long pair of scissors. I've really used very little of the cardstock to create these 3 designs, and they're going to be so impactful when we add our stamped pattern on top. Now for our fourth and final design, we have those little thin strips, and I'm going to adhere these onto some computer paper. Now, a lot of times I print things and then I don't use them. So I use them in my craft room for things like this. Now, I recommend adhering these onto a separate piece of paper because we're going to trim this down and create an element that we can lift off of our card front. So you can see I've adhered this just very loosely with some tape runner adhesive and trimmed it down, and that keeps it removable. And that's going to be important when we add our stamping on top of it. So now we have our 4 color block designs, and now it's time to stamp on top of them. Now keep in mind, any of these patterns can be created with a different color palette. This is just the color palette that I've chosen today. I'm kind of longing for some spring weather, and I feel like this is bringing all the spring vibes. Now off screen, I created kind of a pattern map. I stamped this out using that translucent foliage stamp set that I showed you in the beginning. And now I am placing my first stamp onto the Stamp Wheel 2.0 in that upper left-hand corner. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to place your flip plate, which is that clear plastic plate that you adhere your stamps to, in the same orientation throughout all of this. So I'm making sure that that open hole at the top of my flip plate is always at the 12 o'clock position or straight up from the stamp wheel. So in the upper left-hand corner, I've placed 1 stamp. Then I moved my cardstock over to that upper right-hand corner and I positioned a few more of my stamps. Now this is side number 1 of the flip plate, but we can use both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over to the second side of the flip plate. I'm going to place my cardstock in the lower right-hand corner and position a few more of my stamps. Now, I couldn't put this on side number 1 because this large flower would interfere with the flower that I placed above it on the first layer. So using the second side of this flip plate helps me to get more stamps in position and ready to go so I can move through the stamping of all of my patterns on all of these card fronts really quickly. Now there's a lot going on this flip plate and I don't want to mess anything up. So I'm going to flip this back over to side number 1 and I'm going to mark side number 1 with a piece of washi tape. And I apologize that I'm off screen for that portion, but the side facing up is the side where I can see the washi tape, and so I know to start there. Now for all of these colored panels, I decided that using a watermark ink would be best. I wouldn't have to switch between different colors of ink and I could get a tone-on-tone effect with each of these cardstock colors. So I'm using the Altenew Embossing ink here and I'm inking up the first stamp that's in that upper right-hand corner with this embossing ink. I'm placing my flip plate with that hole at the 12 o'clock position or straight up from the stamp wheel, and I'm stamping this design. Now I did find I liked the results a little bit better when I added a few layers of ink, but that's not a problem when you're using the stamp wheel because you can stamp in the exact same position over and over again. So once I have my first card front stamped with that first stamp, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my second card front. Now, once again, I'm going to use this embossing ink to create a tone-on-tone pattern. I'm going to ink up that stamp that I placed there. And I'm going to show you in just a bit a way to kind of label these so that you can keep it straight, just so that, you get a lot going on and you want to make sure that you're stamping the right thing at the right time. So I'll show you how to label your flip plate in just a bit. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and ink up this stamp and stamp it onto my second card front. Now, building up the watermark or the embossing ink on this particular card panel wasn't giving me the results that I wanted. And so I just flipped this over and I grabbed the pink pearl ink and inked up that floral stamp and stamped on top of this instead. It still gives me a tone-on-tone look, but it shows up a little bit better on these lighter colored cardstocks. Now, once card number 2 is stamped, I'm going to remove it from the stamp wheel and I'm going to place card number 3 and I'm going to go back to the watermark or the embossing ink for this one because there's more than just pink involved on this card front. So I'm going to use that embossing ink and stamp this floral. If I need to ink it up a few times and restamp, I can to really build up the intensity of that watermark ink. And that's what I ended up doing for this card. Now I have stamped the 3 card fronts that have all of the various colors, not the one with the little stripes. And I'll show you why I'm choosing to stamp that at a separate time in just a bit. But for now, we're going to keep rolling with our stamped pattern on these 3 card fronts. So now that I've stamped everything in position 1, I'm going to move to position 2. So all of my cardstock is now going to go into the upper right-hand corner of my stamp wheel. I'm going to ink up the next set of stamps, which is still on the first side of my flip plate, with that watermark or embossing ink again. And then I'm going to flip this over, make sure that that hole is in that 12 o'clock position, and stamp onto my card front. Now to build the depth or deepness or contrast of this ink, I'm going to stamp it a few times. And I'm not going to show you all of the stamping of all of these card bases because I'm going through the same process. I'm just moving through the various sets and positions on my stamp wheel. So once I have the stamping that I want on card front number 1, I'll move into card front number 2, positioning it in the upper right-hand corner of the stamp wheel. I've inked up my stamps, stamped them onto my card front, and now I am going to move this card front into position number 3. Now, before I stamp the stamps in position 3, I have to flip it over to side number 2 because that's where my stamps are. But I also created a mask for that flower in the center with some Altenew masking tape, and I've trimmed out just the bottom part of that because that's the only place where I have overlapping stamps. And this group of stamps on the back side of the flip plate, or side number 2 of the flip plate, is what I'm going to be stamping in position 3. So I've inked it up with this pink pearl ink because that's what I used for my other stamping on this card front. And then I stamped my images with that mask in place. Now, I wanted to build up the intensity of this color again. So once again, I'm inking up my stamps and I'll flip it over and stamp these in position 3. Now, once all of my stamping is done in position 3 for this card front, I'm going to remove the mask from this card front because I can use this over and over again. And I'm going to move on to my next card front and stamp all of those stamps that are in position 3 using that same mask. So you can see I'm moving on to this graduated stripe design. I'm placing the mask right over that center floral. I'm inking up the stamps on side number 2 of my flip plate using that watermark or embossing ink. And then I am going to flip this and stamp right over the top of that mask and card front. So I've done all of my stamping for these first 3 card fronts, and now I'm going to walk you through the stamping for that 4th design with all of the smaller stripes. Now, because these stripes are sitting on top of that card base, they are obviously just slightly higher than the card base. And you're going to see that when I stamp this, it's going to interfere or prevent part of the stamp from transferring the ink to the card base, and it's going to leave me with a gap in my design. So remember earlier when we tacked this down just using a small bit of tape runner adhesive, that's so we could remove it and stamp again over this area. So that little stripe design is removable at this point on purpose so that we can continue our stamping and not have any interference from that additional layer of cardstock. Now, it came in really important in that first floral, but in the additional layers, I didn't find that I had to remove that layer at all. I was able to get a good transfer of the design. I did, however, have to clean the base of my stamp wheel to prevent any of that Obsidian black pigment ink that I'm using from getting on the back side of my card front as I move it around. Now for the final stamping of all of these cards, I wanted one more cluster of leaves, so I'm going to use that masking again. But there was really no place to place the card fronts on the stamp wheel without having it interfere. And so I turned these card bases kind of on their side and used this lower left-hand corner to place this cluster of 3 leaves onto my stamp wheel flip plate. And now I'm inking those up and stamping onto the card front. And this is back on side number 1 of the flip plate. And I'm going to show you now how you can kind of label your flip plate. If you're creating with this over several days, you may want to mark this so you remember what's what. I'm using the satin masking tape from Altenew, and I'm just placing little pieces of the satin masking tape on my flip plate. It will not interfere with my stamping at all. And then I can label these in each step. So I have step number 1, step number 2, and step number 4 on side 1 of my flip plate. Then I can turn it over, and on side number 2, I can mark step number 3. And that way, if I have to step away from my creating, or if I want to create several of these cards over different days, and I'm not sure that I'll remember what order to do these in, I have it all marked, and we all know that we can use a little something to help keep us straight. Am I right? So now that we have all of our stamping done with our color blocked card panels and that beautiful tone-on-tone design, let's move on to creating some sentiments. Now I'm using the solid sentiment strips. This is a one-go set from Altenew. There is a press plate available, but I am just using the die set today, and I've die cut it from some heavyweight white cardstock, and I'm using some of the strip sentiments that are included in the translucent foliage stamp set to stamp onto these strips in Dark Night ink. I wanted to bring in a little bit of navy, but I don't want it to be overwhelming on these card designs. I used that same die to die cut some Dark Night cardstock because I'm going to stack up these little sentiment strips to give them a little more weight and a little more color on these card fronts. And then I have grabbed my Fresh Flowers die set and die cut some leaves out of some vellum to place onto these card fronts. And I'm also using some sentiments. These are the Timeless Sentiments die set from Altenew. I've die cut the shadow layer for each of these sentiments out of some vellum and the actual sentiment from some brush gold cardstock, and then I adhered those together using some liquid glue. I'm adhering all of these sentiments onto my card fronts using some foam adhesive. Now for this card here, I just felt like it needed a little something else, so I cut down a strip of that brushed gold cardstock. I'm adding some liquid glue and I'm going to kind of just tuck it under. It's gonna look like it runs the whole way of the card, but I'm just sneaking it under my sentiments and elements that are already adhered down to the card. And this just gave it a little more of a finished look for this card project. I just used some scissors to trim off the excess, and this really made this card project feel complete where I felt like it was lacking just a little something before. Now to add a little bit of embellishment to these cards, I'm using some pearls from Altenew and the little perfect picker tool to just grab them off of that acetate backer and place them onto my card front. And once I have those embellishments in place, I can take and add some foam adhesive to the back side of each of these card fronts and add them onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding card base. So there you have it, 4 card designs using some color blocking with some cardstock. Keep in mind, you can also use some masking paper and some ink colors that you love to create these same designs using your favorite inks. I just love the way these turned out with that beautiful tone-on-tone stamping in the background, and that touch of gold for the sentiment just elevates these just a bit and gives that shine that I always love on a card project. Now I have to admit, this one here just might be my favorite of all of them, but I would love to hear in the comments below which of these 4 designs is your favorite. Now I did create a bonus project using this same stamp design, but this time I used those smaller colored cardstock strips to create the background for my die cut sentiment. Another way to use lots of different colors on your card projects and add just that pop of color that we all love so much. I want to say thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed these projects and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you around here on YouTube over at my channel. You can find me at Carissa Wiley. I also want to say a big thank you to Jennifer for inviting me to be a guest here on your channel. It's such an honor and I'm so thankful for you. Don't forget to leave a comment below and let me know which of these 4 designs is your favorite. I cannot wait to see what you create with these color blocking ideas. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.
Thank you so much, Chris. I love those colors, and this technique is fantastic. If you are interested in the supplies that Carissa used, or you want to find more of Carissa's work, or you want to find those exclusive codes I talked about, it's all in the description below, or you can go over to my blog where there is a lot more information. Here at the end, I will link to a related video that I've done and also to Carissa's channel. Thanks so much for spending this time with us, and I'll see you soon in another video.